Hey there, this is the Penny on Your Thoughts podcast, and I am your host, Penny Chason. I'm a board certified hypnotist, intuitive, and experiencer. This podcast is about tapping into your subconscious to create a more aligned and abundant life. By leveraging our subconscious, we can master our thoughts, frequency, and vibration. Fusing the conscious, subconscious, and our consciousness is the science of expansion and soul satisfaction. Each week, I'll share in-depth interviews or solo episodes. This podcast was created to share how you have the power to create infinite potential within you. It's my intention that you find this podcast empowering, inspiring, and full of possibility. Now grab your favorite beverage and let's go. Hey everybody, Penny here. Have you ever been at a moment in your life where you really asked yourself, what more is there here? There has to be more to life. To reach this point where you feel like you're really not connected or tuned in, and it's almost as if you're looking to come home to yourself. Well, today's guest and I, we talk about these exact things, and we talk about whether or not we deal with the things inside of us and how we deal with those things so that we can show up fully present in our life, in our business, and in our relationships. Because let's face it, and we touch on this today, I see it time and again, especially entrepreneurs, but also career professionals do this as well. We can throw ourselves into our work as a way of staying distracted and busy and not facing what's going on in our life. I believe you're really going to love this episode. My guest today is Tiffany. She is a hairstylist. She really doesn't like that word because it's such a superficial concept of what she actually does. She gets to know her clients. That connection is one of her love languages. And so she feels that the work that she does when her clients are in the chair goes beyond just styling their hair. But not only now does she style hair, but she serves as a consultant to entrepreneurs and business owners to streamline their business, because in her career, her business has gone from simple to complex and big, and then she streamlined it back again. So she's able to speak from experience about the mental and the emotional that's going on behind the scenes that comes up as we go on this journey of healing ourselves while at the same time being an entrepreneur. There is something in this episode for everyone. So I encourage you to get your favorite beverage and to just settle in. This is a long episode. So go on a nice walk or, snuggle up somewhere with a cup of tea, cup of coffee, and enjoy. And please, after you've listened, go to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, leave me a review and let me know what you thought of this episode. All right, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to have you tell your story about how you got to where you are today, because you mentioned to me that there was a point in time where when you were the salon owner and you were wondering, what more is there, right? Am I just Tiffany, the hairstylist, the salon
Yeah,
owner? I would love for you to just kind of take it from there and let's go on a journey.
absolutely. Thanks for having me and letting me share this. For people who aren't familiar with like the hairdresser background, there's a lot of different pay structures and opportunities just in the traditional like hairdresser realm, from working, in a commission based salon, which would be more of a traditional like 9 to 5, to going on your own, to freelancing. and etc. And I have to be honest, throughout the years, I worked as a stylist. I helped manage other people's salons, but I didn't really want to be an owner. I knew that that was more work. And I also knew that as a manager, I got some perks and some benefits, but I can't say that that was always like a long calling of mine. And I was living in New York and relocated to Denver. And for the first time, I couldn't find a place I wanted to work in. Now, as a whole, I'm sure there's fine salons in Colorado. I just didn't find what felt like home to me. So I knew that I had to create it. So I continued to work managing other people's salons and also worked with the small business like association, like the community, almost like chamber offices in a town, and built a salon and opened. And I felt like everything that I had worked to kind of led me to that moment. And even in that moment, it was so like I just have to keep going. This is next. Now I have built it out. Now I have staff. Now I have staff, dependent on me. I remember going one time to a stylist apartment. She had just gotten her very first apartment. She traditionally had always had like roommates. And, we went over as a team to like hang out and stuff and see it. And I remember walking into that space and thinking, like, my money pays for this. Like my business isn't always only dependent on me. It is now affording other people, their livelihoods. And it was also just, a lot of pressure at different times that I had to stay afloat and keep going to keep everything going. And let's see, that was like in 2015 that I'd opened. And in 2016 or so, about a year and a half into being open, my world just kind of got shook up. I had always had a thriving business, but for the first time, my personal life was requiring me to show up in a way that I didn't know how to, and I didn't have the time to show up for it. And both of those things kind of led me to that moment of what who am I outside of, a hairdresser? This is my only identity and the only thing that I had felt or created a story that I knew how to do.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple of important things there. You talk about the identity piece
Mhm.
of it, but it's also when we run a business,
Mhm.
we don't our personal life isn't on hold.
Yeah.
And when our personal life is going, sometimes we can create a business where we can put our business on pause, but not always. That's not something that's always possible. How are you managing during that time when you recognize your identity was really caught up in that?
I laugh because in many ways I don't know I don't know if managing was really a term that I would use. I think that, when life felt crazy, I threw myself into the business. And I can look back at years of my career that when things didn't, weren't going smoothly, or I was being avoidant, or, other things were being thrown at me, that's when my businesses soared because I chose just departmentalize it and shove it away and to really step into the business. It was something that I could control. So what I couldn't deal with at home or, in my personal life, I really was just kind of avoidant almost of it and showed up and flourished at work because it was something that I could, control and show up for and also feed that ego part of like, oh, well, look at this. My work is going really well.
How did your personal life do? What was that like during that time when you're avoiding that and throwing yourself into the business? Because I've said many times, sometimes as entrepreneurs, if we're not dealing with the things inside of us that need to be dealt with, our business can kind of become our therapist.
Oh, for sure, for sure. You know, I mean, just as I was sharing, like, okay, I'm going to avoid this, so I'm going to throw myself into more work. Not only was I making more work inside of my work to do, but because I was a provider, I was like taking more clients. And it all was a big snowball to burnout. I, it was funny because I was actually going through some old audio things that I had recorded for clients. And I had shared this story. So I have a bulldog. He's 8 now. I got him also right as the salon was opening. Like as if you didn't need a lot of new things, I added a puppy to the mix. And anybody who has a puppy or who doesn't and maybe just seen it on TV, a puppy requires like a lot of attention. And Mash is an old English bulldog. So he was this wrinkly little, like smushy thing that was just so cute. And because I own this salon, he could come to work with me. And so, it was kind of intertwined on some of that. But I would come home from seeing clients and, maybe 10, 12 hours of a day, like providing services. And I just couldn't deal with MASH. Just it was too much. I just needed a break. And I also knew that that wasn't fair to him in the sense of he's so excited, he's a puppy, he just needs this attention and needs to play. So I like got up and I went to the bathroom. And you shut the bathroom door, and I imagine if people have kids it's probably similar, but here's this little puppy foot like trying to get underneath the bathroom door, trying to get my attention still. I'd use the bathroom, and I found myself just sitting there because it was like that was just a few minutes to myself. And then I would get up and go play with my dog again. And I found myself repeating this, that I would sit in the bathroom for a few extra minutes, maybe scrolling on social media. It was just like a few of those minutes where I didn't have to deal with him, work was over, but like I was literally spending my time in on the toilet. Like it doesn't even make sense. And this continues for like a few days until one day, instead of just sitting on the toilet, I was so tired that I laid down in the empty bathtub. So the bathroom door is still shut, the little puppy paws sticking through it. And I realized that a few minutes wasn't going to be enough, that I needed to like some time to myself. So I laid in that empty bathtub for like 10, 15 minutes and then got up again to show up for the rest of my evening and proceed on. And then again, the next day, I did the same thing. And so, what moved from a few minutes in a toilet is now me laying empty on a bathtub. And it was really, after doing this routine for, a few days that turns into a week, do I start to take kind of an inventory? And I'm like, what am I doing? My free time, trying to escape my life, escape the dog, decompress from work, are these minutes in an empty bathtub. And that was really kind of that pivotal point that like something's not working. Something's not working in the business, something's not working at home, something's not working with like my time management schedule, that I'm having to crawl into an empty bathtub to try to find another place to escape.
Yeah, and for everyone listening, I just want you to really take in what Tiffany just shared, because it is so important that we can end up in a place where we get, basically, I'm going to use the word addicted. We get addicted to the busyness to distract ourselves from what's uncomfortable. And then the busyness became the frustration and the
Mhm.
problem. And that few minutes in the bathtub was her quiet pull away from everything. But, for some people, it might not be quiet in a bathtub. It might
Mhm.
be a bottle of wine. It might be, um, you know, some other mind altering substance, or a way to detach and disconnect from things. And what was, I think, so important that you said was you recognized that that wasn't right for you and you took inventory of what was going on. Where did you where did you go from there? Because I can't imagine it was a very comfortable or pleasing to yourself moment to recognize that you're spending your time laying in the bathtub to get away from this beautiful puppy. I have had kids and I know what it is to like you just need to peel away for a few minutes. So where did you go from there when you recognized that something needed to change?
Yeah. So moment, where it's kind of like something isn't working with life and work. In that 2015, 2016 time, also, I'd had kind of this whirlwind romance. And unfortunately, my then partner was in a tragic accident. And over the course of about 6 months of not being able to work and walk, had gotten addicted to pain pills, which then in a couple years, he was addicted to like street drugs. So that was like something that was backboning kind of this same time. And a lot of what I was avoiding in life as well. So, about the same time that the bathroom moments are happening, him and I also end up in a um, like a therapy office for friends and families of, addiction and stuff. And it was there that this woman had asked me, like, what do you want? And I am assuming because we are there for my partner's addiction that that's what we want to talk about. So I'm going to talk all about him. And she really forced me to look at myself and kind of take responsibility, not for that situation, but in the sense of what do I want and what can I be responsible for? And when I started to talk about things that I felt like I wanted, it was more about a quality of life. And regardless of the outcome or what would happen, over the years with him and I, it was the first time that I really started to look at who was I besides work. I'd throw myself so much into work, and that was my only identity. So even when somebody asked me, like, what do you want? It sounds so simple, but like I literally could not answer it. And, at the same time as, kind of happens when people are starting new businesses or big life changes, I also didn't have a lot of extra money. The business side, I was pouring everything back into the business. I had a partner not living at the house, so I was picking up full of the household responsibilities. And people are like, "Oh, self care, go do things for yourself," or go try this new hobby or this new class. And to me, all I could see was like dollar signs and a point that things were very tight. So it was like, how do I start to dissect who I am or even develop a relationship with myself, something that, looking back at now, I had avoided so long in life. How do I even give myself permission to look at myself and to, start dating or nurturing a relationship? I think when we think of relationships, people can think of like, oh, modern dating, like on an app, swiping, and then we have some communication, and then we're dating, you're moving in, all of these like stages. But I had to start treating myself the same way and getting to know myself outside of work, getting to know things that I liked or didn't like. And though I'd always, throughout the years and even in this like, heavy moment, like I had enjoyed life, but I also was just going through the motions of it. So how do I really like own it and get to know myself and start doing things again just for myself?
Yeah, you mentioned you were seeing dollar signs talking about self-care. So for people who might find themselves in a similar situation, getting overloaded with the same advice, like where did you start? What's one or two things that you did that started to maybe crack the door open for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I've recently just moved as well, like in the last a couple of weeks. And I think getting to know the area that you're in. And even for people who have lived somewhere for a long time, have you ever really gone to that zoo or that museum or that coffee shop or popped into that little store? Like getting to know that area or neighborhood, the work neighborhood, maybe, museums, zoos, all of that usually have free days. Is that something that you can take advantage of? A lot of times, like Eventbrite, not even knowing, but you can just go on there and search for a free event. Maybe it's a community event that's online, or maybe it is something like in person. And for the people who are like, "Oh, I don't like those things," like, I get it. There's things I don't like either, then don't do it and find something else that you do like. I like walk a lot. So is there a podcast that I can listen to and walk? If you are not into podcasts, I will even sometimes listen to Netflix on my phone and not pay attention to the screen. Depending on what you're watching, like, you can do that. A lot of the, like, reality TV shows, do we actually need to see it? Maybe it's learning to cook a new recipe. I love Asian food, so I go to an Asian market. Maybe I ask a question. Maybe I know ahead of time. I made like learn to make spring rolls. Then let's make dessert ones. These are things that it's fun and it's curious in my mind. It's something that I want to do, but it's also like childlike, but it's feeding and nutrients to myself. So we've kind of like full gamut around.
Yeah.
Like, if I could I think just telling expensive would be, like, my one underlying mission. And I come from luxury high-end hair services. Like, of course, it's expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just what are some other things that we can do, that don't cost that?
Yeah. So what were your next steps once you began to really lean into what you wanted? Because I know that a lot of what you do now is not directly salon management anymore, right? I mean, you've done a lot of different things.
I've
So,
pivoted a lot the last few years.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
That goes back to that being childlike and
Mhm,
finding what feels good. I think so many people end up unhappy because they go and they get an education or they learn a trade or a skill. And once they've invested that time and money in that education and training, there's this belief that somehow you have to stick with it your entire life,
mhm,
which thank God that's not the case.
mhm. Yeah, I think it's hard when there's kind of expectations of what people assume and want you to do things. um, for me, that once all of these things were kind of coming to play, I had also realized I created a business that required me to work behind a chair all the time to make money. So it was about finding a way to scale myself back out of the business. So the first jump, I went from like 55, 60 hours a week to like 30 hours with clients. That's almost half. That was huge. I was in a position that I could give staff some of my clients. I was in a position that, managing salons, that I knew how to readjust my schedule to make that happen. And I started to focus on what in my business was rinse and repeat. How can we get social media, a system and a process that I don't have to do it? How do we learn to order supplies so I don't have to do it? How can we take everything that I've been doing that had been stuck in my head for years and allow somebody else to do it, to automate it, to, find another solution that didn't require me? Because I was really starting to try to buy my time back so that I could go do more of other things.
Yeah, that's the beauty of running a business. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you or did you not create a course for salon owners at one point?
Yeah, I've done a lot of things. I when I f- so scaled my business back, cut hours, started making more money, started traveling like every other week, and really over the course of like a year, did a 360 in the salon business. And as I was doing that, I realized that I could help other people do that. I had already, been successful in managing people's salons. So I knew a lot of stuff, already. But then here I did this big transformative thing. And how can I make, other owners' lives simpler? So when I first, was playing around with the idea of it, really a couple people had reached out and I was like, oh, let's meet for coffee. And then it was like, wait, I'm spending my time doing this and I just got my time back. So I created courses on culture, hiring, management of people. I created courses on streamlining policies, procedures, kind of all of that. And I still don't think I ever really found exactly what I was looking for. I realized at some point I liked working with the staff, like the actual technicians, and getting them to soar in their career as opposed to, the salon owners in general. Then I kind of got pushed and went to other business startup. And, I was like, wait, I don't like working behind a computer. I want to go back in person. I think that part of the journey, like I'm still very much so on, but I have created courses for a lot of different things.
Yeah, because you were at the retreat last year. And I do remember you talking about the systems piece, and you really weren't,
Mhm.
kind of sure, like, you know what, I think I want to go back. I want to get behind a chair again. And I mean, it's nice because you're in a situation where you have the flexibility that you can go in either direction. But one thing I also notice, you're very much a systems driven person, which I'm not. So that, like, that's one of those things that I envy, because don't ask me to create a system. Give me a system and I'll follow it. It's just such a different way of thinking. So would you be open to sharing a little bit more around um, how you handled really not being caught up in that doing that you were in the business? Because yes, you dialed your hours back, yes, you did the courses, you have that flexibility, but that can be challenging for us to do if we're not really addressing the underlying piece. So I recognize that it started in that therapist office with what you really
Mhm.
want and giving yourself
Mhm.
some self-care, but I think you and I both know, like, it takes more than that to really evolve as a person. And I think that all entrepreneurs who stay in business long enough, it becomes a personal growth journey.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so like intertwined as an entrepreneur. That business, that personal is just, completely just intertwined. Um, um, as a hairdresser, every hour or so, I'm told how good I am. Well, hopefully a client has liked their service, but I get that praise all day long. Oh, it's so great to see you. It's so good. They're reacting to a social media. They're leaving a review. They're leaving me a bigger tip. So all day long, I'm getting like, you're good, you're good, you're good. And then not only when I started to decrease my hours, but in 2020, right, when I closed the salon, all of that is cut off. And then I feel like I went through a huge, other kind of like shift in my life again, because if I was still holding on to that a little bit, it was like completely gone. And going back to the whole like a relationship with myself, I had just to sit in the fact that like there was a part of me and a part of my ego that loved that so much. And I didn't need other people to validate who I was and how good I was. Like I could do that for myself. But like easier said than done. And I'm like trying to make sense of it even still, like how like all of that would kind of happen. But I think just learning to sit with some of that uncomfortable and stuck. I had spent years not paying attention to myself or, second guessing maybe a decision or something like that. And I could not even like articulate in an emotion how I felt with anything. It was either like everything's great or it's okay. I'd never really allowed myself to be like anything less than. And not that I want anybody to get stuck in that feeling or like this is crappy or, anything, but I also had to learn that it was okay to feel some of that because I had never, even on the Rolodex of emotions, I couldn't even identify them. Like I had to pull up a Google spreadsheet and look for words of emotions to then think if I had felt that way, do I feel that way now? How do I feel it? And like that's crazy at, 36, 37, I'm 40 now, but like I could not even identify emotions. Like it was never taught to me.
That's not that unusual.
I think if any of your listeners are, experiencing maybe not being able to identify emotion or feel an emotion, one exercise that I had come across that really helped me was you can put a piece of chocolate. And if you have any like food aversions and don't want to do it with food, you can also do this with like an ice cube. But you put this item like in your mouth and you just start thinking of how it feels in your mouth. And again, I had to do this with like a Google sheet in front of me that listed all of all of the adjective words that I didn't even have. But as the chocolate is moving around, you can talk about how it feels in your teeth and your gums, and also, how it's feeling dissolving, or if your cheeks are starting to pucker or anything, because they're just words that I was never even familiar with.
Right.
And really like trying to get to that core part of emotions. That's how I started was descriptive words and with food.
Yeah, I've heard of people saying before that, they would Google a sheet and a
Mhm.
list of words of emotions to begin to define what they feel. And I want to piggyback on that a little bit because I hear a lot of people, the word they use to define their emotions is they just feel less than. They can't put their finger on what it is, they just feel less than good. And as women, in my experience, doing the emotional and insight based work that I do in hypnosis, a lot of times we will mask certain emotions because we're taught that we shouldn't be angry, how we're expected to act. So a lot of times we'll believe that we're feeling sadness. And what we're doing to alleviate the sadness causes frustration because it's not working when it's
Mhm.
actually anger underneath the surface. We're angry. We're irritated because something wasn't fair. And it comes across as sadness because what we have lost is our power to speak up, our power to be heard
Mhm.
and to be seen. And so that's what we've lost is our visibility. And I think really since the pandemic hit, I've seen a huge shift in women in business and women online and some men too, um, in really allowing ourselves to be seen, to be heard. And I imagine that must have been something really empowering for you to be able to articulate what you were actually feeling so you could do something about it.
Absolutely. And, when I talk about like, oh, I threw myself into work because I didn't want to deal with my personal life over the years. After I closed everything down and was trying to transition, I kept saying I was trying to recreate the feeling of the salon. And I was saying that for like years. And I was like, okay, so what does that actually mean? As a guest coming in, like, okay, you're welcome, involved, invited, like whatever. But then I started to reflect back on what that meant to me. And in that space, it was the empowerment that I had given myself. It was because I had a voice in work, but not at home. So in work, I felt that I could speak up, I could question things, but I didn't ever feel that I had that at home, for a multitude of different reasons. So I really can relate to like what you're sharing. And also, if any of your listeners, um, follows Jim. He said this, but it's not like a quote of his, but he was talking one time about how like he wasn't angry because he wasn't like, angry person. And then he, came to the realization that even though it wasn't angry as an angry person, that he was angry, that was an emotion he was feeling, but it was not coming out as like yelling. Like I'm not a yeller. So I, agree with what you were sharing earlier. Like I never thought that I was like angry or something, but then I look back at times that I felt very angry that I didn't have a voice, or maybe I didn't use it, or it just was coming out in another emotion, like you were saying.
Yeah, it can show up a lot of different ways, and women in particular. Um, you were talking about MASH, but for women who have children, I mean, we're my generation. I'm Gen X. We're coming through this phase where our mothers were transitioning into the workplace. So what we see is a mom who's working, she's cooking, she's cleaning, she's managing the kids, she's doing the laundry, and she's trying to be Mrs. Beaver. Is that the right family? I
Yeah.
don't know. I didn't watch
Yeah.
that show. So she's trying to
Yeah.
be Mrs. Beaver and be a corporate or a business woman, um, whether she's employee or management or above. And what I saw in healthcare, for those of you, if this is your first time listening, I was in healthcare for 25 years. Periodically you would have patients who had cancer, and they would have very aggressive forms of cancer, and I would always hear the surgeons and the nurses say, I'd be given anesthesia and they'd be like, you know what, she is the kindest person, she has sacrificed everything for her family, like everybody talks about how she has always given, and here she is. Well, always giving to somebody else means we're saying no to ourselves. We're saying no to our self care. We're saying no to the things that make us happy to make other people happy. We're really sacrificing all the time. And because we may not always express that anger as rage, we may not even realize it's there. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because being in tune to our feelings and our emotions so that we can process and let go of the things that we can put down and walk away from, is so important.
Yeah. And, in all of that transition, because I can be as a people pleaser, former people pleaser, or still working on not being a people pleaser all the time. You know, when you talk about how balancing work and having a family or doing this and doing all the things, I've always wanted to do all the things. One, because I'm curious and I want to do it. Two, because I probably want the control of doing the said thing. Three, I have FOMO. And so I don't want to not go to the Halloween party because it's going to be very fun. Or, and then I need to show up with a platter of treats for the party because I saw this thing on Pinterest and everybody was making it. And I think that, the big thing for me is that I had to learn it was okay to not do everything. That because I wasn't doing something didn't make me less than. That's that word that you were using again. If I chose not to attend, a social event, people were not going to forget about me. Or it wasn't because I did not care. I also just needed to show up for myself, and that might not work in my schedule right now. I had to be okay that, you know, um, was the kitchen sink dishes gonna sit in there? When life is feeling very crazy or overwhelmed, it is probably because of some sort of schedule, time, value, perception of how we're spending our time. And it's messy getting to the other side of that sometimes because it's work, it's transition. We have to do different things, show up differently, like ask for help or whatever those things may be. But I think that it starts with giving ourselves that permission that maybe everything is not getting done. And, until we kind of get a grasp on how we're spending our time or where our focus is or where that intention is and taking care of ourselves to take care of other people better or to show up better for our business, like sometimes that is just messy. And, I use the money reference earlier. Like I didn't have money to do different things. We have to find other ways that don't always, cost money to like be able to have fun or to be able to, steer ourselves out of, some sort of like transition.
Yeah. I think giving ourselves permission to say no
Mhm.
is sometimes one of the most valuable gifts that we can give ourselves. You talked about how you value self acceptance um, earlier. How did you come to that place and what does that look like for you now?
So I think there was throughout the years, growing up in childhood and adolescence, that my parents did a phenomenal job of saying, like, you're different. It's okay. It's fun. They accepted my curiosity. My dad let me take apart everything. He was a very patient man. We were constantly like building things. So there was qualities about me that I always knew that maybe were not mainstream, but I was also very grateful that those were celebrated. So I grew up, oh, I just see things different, or I just do things different, or I don't want that. I want this. And that was okay. And as a household, I do recognize that I'm very grateful that I had that and was able to, feel comfortable with some of those things. Then I think we get to like all of the other like messy stuff of myself that I was choosing not to deal with. And that's why I was being avoidant. And that was like something I just had to learn. Nobody really like teaches you, again, going back to like motions, nobody really taught me these things. And I had to start to learn to, that these moments were just a part of my story. They're not the final landing point. Maybe they're pivotal. Most of them years later, like aren't even that big of a deal as they felt in those moments. But, you know, trying to feel like that I had to do it all and what I wasn't doing was wrong, or because I didn't have things were wrong, or I was failing, at different points in times. It brought a lot of shame, to different parts of me. And, oh, I will tell this whole side, but I won't show this. Or, just these kind of different, that there were pieces of me I wasn't even accepting of and had to come, kind of to terms with. And I think a big thing that's really helped me with that, I mean, honestly, is like the power of like books, YouTube, social media, because it was an opportunity for me to see other people's stories, and people's stories that, were grand and they had accomplished things or changed the world or even just grew a successful business, in different ways, shapes, or form. And then they had this piece of them that was similar to my story. You know, I like struggled with, I had like my own struggles with addiction when I was like 18, 19, 20. And for a long time, like, I never told anybody about that or anything in that kind of realm because I wouldn't want you to think differently of me. And then once we got like 10, 15 years, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's happened to me, because why does it matter? It does not define who I am. I didn't feel like, held down by it or anything. And so I think that's why I like to share my story so much, because if somebody can see something in my story at some point in time and I can say, look, I'm here and it's okay. Or look, I'm here and I'm a different person. Or look, I'm here and I built a new life. That I really like owe it to other people ahead of me who have chosen to share their story so that I can help learn to accept different pieces of myself. I think that's like the first part of it.
Yeah, and I love that because I think you talk about YouTube, the podcasts, the books. You went seeking because you realized there had to be something better.
Yeah.
Was there ever a point where you, before you reached that, was there ever a point where you thought, is this all there is?
Like, I want to say no, but I do know moments in time I felt very stuck.
Yeah.
But I do think that I've always just had this notion, intuition, whatever it may be, that nothing is permanent, that everything can change, and that I can create a new life at any point in time.
I love that.
I I don't know, like, from a young age, I was raised more religious, like, as a household until, my dad was a chemical engineer, so, of course, then I'm in Sunday school asking how Adam and Eve has happened when, I learned about evolution. I mean, it's a whole different topic, but, I think that, some of that questioning was always there. And I was probably like 20. Yeah, I was about 20 years old, just getting into hairdressing, and somebody's mother did Reiki and had mentioned to me, like, oh, you should have this done. And I was like, okay, sure. I didn't know anything about it or whatever. And that woman also gave me the book, The Secret, and all of that, kind of like started that spiritual relationship that has, grown throughout the years, that really started when I think you're right in a sense of there was always something that I was seeking. I do have to like backbone it a little bit, that I also have to give myself some grace, that I don't need to be seeking something all of the time.
I think that's a great point. And I talk about that too. There within the spiritual community, there's such an emphasis on journaling and shadow work and introspection that I think that some people get into this incorrect pattern of always thinking there's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, and know that, yeah, like, is there different things I'm still striving for? Like, 100%, but also, like, here are all of, the daily interactions that I have in my life that are great. Here are all the things that I'm still working towards. And, I think that that really probably is like the key to that self acceptance, to learning to be present, because we're happy and content with where we're at. We validate, where we have been, and still knowing that there is more that, that we are trying to obtain or search or answer, but that it's always a moving target, but it doesn't have to be so consuming, and allow yourself the permission to, be present with your day.
Yeah. If someone wants to just kind of follow along or learn more about how you help salon
Mhm.
owners or business owners with systems, because that's really how we buy our time back is with systems. And that could
Yeah.
be in our personal life too. It just doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be only in our business. Where can they find you? Where can they follow up? Because I think that this is just a really good place to leave this conversation.
Absolutely. So, I'm sure Penny will have all the links and stuff connected, but on my social accounts, I have two. One for the salon world that is just at Village Solo, and I do have one at Tiffany Giovanni, and she'll have all the links and things, so you don't have to try to spell my last name because it looks like a typo.
I really
Perfect.
love this conversation, and it's one that's going to be worth re-listening to, just because we touched on so many important points around self-acceptance and to know that there's always something better, to recognize when you're distracting away in your life, in your business, and to recognize that that's a sign there's something else going on. And I just love that as a business owner, you pointed out that you were actually creating more to do in your business during the period of time that happened. And just to leave with this one thought that she talked about self acceptance and being present. When we're in a state of self acceptance, we're no longer living in the past. We're not letting that past define us. It's not our identity. we can acknowledge who we are, what we've experienced, and how that's helped us become the person we are without identifying with the person or as the person who experienced those things. So if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a screenshot, tag Tiffany or myself. I'll have our Instagram handles below, and help us share this message with other women and entrepreneurs, and yes, men too, who might find some piece of wisdom or insight in this that changes their lives. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing and being vulnerable.
Oh, yes, Penny. I mean, thank you so much. I really appreciate you for having me.
All right. I'll catch you next week, everybody. I hope you can feel my appreciation and gratitude for you, my listener. I would love to connect with you outside of the podcast platform. There are a few ways that you can do that. If you're not already on my email list, you can go to pennychason.com/myth and download the Big Mindset Myth PDF. Or you can go to Instagram and follow me at penny.chason. You can connect with me there. I would love to see you there. And of course, you could always head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive review of this episode. I appreciate you, and I will see you back here next week.